The door slammed behind me with a finality I couldn't ignore. The echo of the sound reverberated in the grand hallway, and with it, my heart dropped. I had never thought it would come to this. As I stood there, frozen in disbelief, my husband, the man I had been married to for over 15 years, walked out on me, on our entire life together. The papers he had just signed in front of me weren't just divorce papers. No, they were far worse. They were the symbol of betrayal. He had given me a look that I will never forget. It was cold, calculating, and indifferent. He didn't even glance back as he walked toward the car, his new lover sitting beside him, her youthful face glowing with that kind of arrogant pride that only someone who had just won a game they hadn't even known they were playing could possess. And then it hit me. In that very moment, standing in the expensive house we had built together, filled with memories, achievements, and struggles, I realized I was nothing more than a forgotten chapter in the story of his life. He had left me for someone younger, someone who hadn't seen the years of sacrifice, the tears, and the effort I had put into this relationship. But there was one thing he didn't know. He didn't know about the $200 million property I had inherited just a few weeks ago. The property, a vast stretch of prime real estate in the heart of Lagos, had been passed down to me by my late father. A property that had been overlooked by everyone, except me. I had kept it a secret, buried it deep in my heart, never revealing it to anyone. But now, as I watched him drive away, I couldn't help but feel a surge of both anger and triumph. He had thought he could take everything from me. My dignity, my love, my future. But he had no idea what was waiting for him. He didn't know I was now sitting on a fortune that could change everything. Would I keep it a secret? Or would I let him know the truth? The truth that he had just thrown away more than just our marriage. He had thrown away his share of the wealth he never knew existed. I could hear the engine of the car roar in the distance as he drove away, but my mind was far away. I stared at the divorce papers in my hands, my name scrawled across them in black ink, and for the first time in years, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of cold resolve. The door swung open, and my best friend, Nneka, rushed in. Her eyes widened as she saw the papers in my hand. You didn't let him go without a fight, did you? She asked, her voice full of disbelief. I shook my head slowly. No, I said softly, looking at the papers. He has no idea what he's done. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? What do you have planned? I didn't answer her immediately. Instead, I moved to the window and stared out at the city. It was a sight I had come to love. The bustling streets, the vibrant energy, the relentless pursuit of success. I had been a part of that world once, but now it felt different. Felt like a new chapter was about to begin. But how would it play out? How would I tell him about the $200 million? Would he come crawling back when he realized what he had lost? Or would he be too proud, too arrogant? There was only one way to find out. But first I had to focus. There was a storm coming, and it wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about everything I had built, everything I had kept hidden. I glanced at Nneka, who was waiting for my response. Her face was full of concern, but I couldn't tell her everything. Not yet. Not when I had so much at stake. Nneka, I said, my voice steady. I have something to tell you. Something that could change everything. The night was heavy with silence as I sat alone in the vast living room, the soft hum of the air conditioning being the only sound that filled the space. I had never felt so small in a house that was meant to be my sanctuary. The walls, once filled with the laughter of our family, now seemed like cold, indifferent spectators to my misery. The grand piano in the corner, which I had spent countless hours playing, now seemed foreign to me. It was all a lie, everything I had believed about our life together. Nneka had left shortly after I told her about the inheritance. I had seen the shock in her eyes, and I could tell she was weighing the consequences of everything I was saying. It wasn't just about a piece of land anymore. It was about power, about control, and the realization that I had something he wanted but could never have. I picked up the divorce papers again, tracing the lines of my signature. My heart beat faster with each second. I had been married to Julius for 15 years. 15 years of trust, love, and dedication. 15 years of believing that our future would be one filled with happiness. But the truth was, the man I had loved had never truly seen me. He had never seen the woman behind the successful wife, the one who had built their life with her own hands. No, all he had seen was the shell of a woman he could control. The thought of him with someone else, someone younger, made my stomach churn. I could already picture her. The way she smiled at him with that naive sense of confidence, unaware of the game he was playing. She didn't know him like I did. She didn't know the man who could pretend to love you one moment and discard you the next. I let out a slow breath and closed my eyes. There was a part of me that wanted revenge. Part of me wanted to confront him, to scream at him for his betrayal, to show him that I was worth more than his fickle affections. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would only make me look small, pathetic, just like the way he saw me. No, I needed to play this carefully. There was more at stake than just my pride. The property, the inheritance. It was mine. And Julius? Well, he would soon learn that there were consequences to underestimating me. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, reminding me that time was slipping away. I needed to act quickly. Julius would be expecting me to collapse into despair, to beg for him to come back. He would be waiting for me to come crawling, broken and defeated. But that wasn't who I was. Not anymore. I stood up abruptly, my mind made up. The future had already been decided for me. But it wasn't going to be what Julius expected. I would find a way to take control of the property, ensure it was legally secured in my name with no way for him to touch it. Then I would decide what to do with it. I could sell it, or I could build something that would make him regret every single decision that led to this moment. But first, I had to go to the bank. I had to make sure the assets were fully under my control. Julius had no idea what he was up against. But he would soon find out. The next morning came with a light drizzle, a soft reminder of the storm brewing in my life. The weight of what I was about to do settled heavily on my shoulders. But there was no turning back. I had already made up my mind, and today would be the day I took control. The property had been kept secret for too long, and now it was mine to protect. I couldn't let Julius or anyone have access to what was rightfully mine. I drove to the bank in silence, the city streets blurring past me as I focused on the task ahead. The building in front of me looked imposing, with its sleek glass windows reflecting the gray sky. It was a far cry from the small town I had grown up in, where life moved at a slower pace, and the people were always connected by the shared knowledge of each other's lives. But that was before. Now I was part of a world that demanded precision, wealth, and power. I couldn't afford to be naive anymore. As I entered the bank, the cool air hit me, and I walked to the counter where a young woman in a sharp uniform greeted me. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I assist you today?" Her voice was polite, professional, but something in her eyes made it clear that she was already making assumptions about me. I handed her the envelope containing the property documents and explained that I wanted to secure it under my name, officially and legally. She took the papers without hesitation, but there was a noticeable pause before she spoke again. "I'll need to confirm a few details with our legal team," she said, her tone a little more cautious now. I nodded and took a seat in the waiting area, my thoughts racing. How had I ended up here? Just a few months ago, Julius and I were planning our future together. We had dreams of expanding our business, buying more properties, and traveling the world. But now, he was gone, and all that remained was this cold, unfeeling reality. My phone buzzed in my bag, and I pulled it out, seeing a message from Chica. "You good? Did you go to the bank? Keep me posted." I quickly typed back, "Yes, I'm at the bank now. I'll let you know once everything is settled." Just then, the young woman returned, her expression now neutral. She handed me the papers and spoke again, this time with a tone that was more respectful. "The transaction has been completed. The property is officially registered under your name. You have full control of the assets." A wave of relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by something darker, a sense of foreboding. Julius had no idea that I had moved so quickly, that I had already taken steps to secure what he thought was his. "Thank you," I said, standing up and gathering my things. I walked out of the bank with a sense of quiet triumph. But there was still so much to figure out. What would I do with the property now? How would I use it to my advantage? I could hear Julius's voice in my head, mocking me. You think you're better than me, don't you? Always trying to prove something. But he had no idea. He didn't know the truth. The real reason I had kept the property a secret all these years. It wasn't just about the money. It was about power, about showing him that I didn't need him to succeed. I had built my life without him, and I could continue without him. But as I walked to my car, a sudden realization hit me. Julius would eventually find out. The question was, how would he react? Would he come crawling back to me, begging for forgiveness? Or would he be too proud to admit that he had underestimated me? I couldn't help but smile at the thought. Either way, I had the upper hand now. The days that followed were filled with a strange mixture of calm and tension. The world outside felt unchanged, yet everything in my life had shifted. I walked through the house, looking at the familiar spaces. Each room now seemed colder, emptier without Julius. The echoes of our past, the laughter we shared, the arguments we had, all of it seemed so distant. It felt like I had stepped into a new life altogether, one that was uncertain but full of possibility. I still hadn't told anyone about the $200 million property. Not Chica, not anyone. It was my secret, my bargaining chip. But it weighed on me. Julius wasn't stupid. He would figure it out soon enough. He might not have known the full extent of the wealth I'd inherited, but he was smart enough to know that something had changed, that I had become someone he could no longer control. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a call I had been dreading. Hello, Nneka. It's Julius. His voice, smooth and calm as always, sent a chill down my spine. For a moment I said nothing. I wasn't ready for this. Wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. Julius, I said, my voice steady but guarded. What do you want? He didn't respond immediately. I could almost hear him taking a breath on the other side of the line. I've been thinking, he began, his tone changing ever so slightly. About us. About everything that's happened. I leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. What exactly are you thinking, Julius? I asked, my voice more curt than I intended. I know I've made mistakes. I've hurt you, he said, almost as if he was trying to sound sincere. But I've also realized something. I've been selfish and I'm sorry. I closed my eyes, letting his words hang in the air. There was a time when I would have given anything to hear him say those words. But now they felt empty, like hollow promises wrapped in sweet words. You're sorry? I asked, my voice rising with disbelief. Is that all you have to say after everything? After you walked away from our marriage for some young girl? There was a pause on the other end, and for a brief moment I thought he would hang up. But instead, his voice softened. Nneka, I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm just asking for a chance to make things right. Can we talk? Can we meet? I laughed bitterly. Meet? Why? So you can beg me to take you back? So you can pretend that you didn't destroy everything we had? His silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. It was the realization that he had no answer, no way to undo the damage he had done. He was powerless in the face of my cold resolve. I've made my decision, Julius, I said firmly. There's no coming back from this. It's over. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like a weight had been lifted from me. But there was still something unsettled inside. I hadn't expected him to call. I hadn't expected him to apologize. But deep down, I knew it was a move to regain control, to pull me back into his orbit. The doorbell rang just as I set the phone down. I opened the door to find Chica standing there, her face serious. You won't believe what just happened, she said, her voice urgent. I frowned. What happened? Chica stepped inside, glancing around nervously. Julius. He's been asking questions. Questions about the property. I froze. What do you mean? What property? The one you inherited, she replied. I don't know how he found out, but he's been digging into it. He's made some calls, Nneka. He's coming for it. My heart skipped a beat. I had been hoping I could keep the property a secret for a little longer, but now it seemed like everything was about to unravel. Julius had always been resourceful, and if he was determined to get what he thought was rightfully his, he wouldn't stop until he had it. I ran my fingers through my hair, pacing the room. How did he find out? I whispered more to myself than to Chica. That's not the problem, Chica said, her voice low but firm. The problem is that he knows enough to make things difficult. He might try to take legal action, Nneka. He could try to claim that he's entitled to part of it, given your marriage and everything you've built together. My stomach churned at the thought. He was going to fight me for it, and this time he wouldn't be the one walking away empty-handed. I had to prepare. I had to be smart. I turned to Chica, my mind already working through the possibilities. I need to make sure he doesn't take this from me, I said, my voice sharp with resolve. I won't let him take what's mine. The days after Chica's warning felt like they were stretching into a never-ending blur of tension and uncertainty. The weight of what was happening hit me harder with each passing hour. Julius was not someone who could be easily beaten, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep his sense of entitlement ran. The idea of him trying to claim what was mine, what he had no right to, filled me with both anger and a sense of urgency. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let him take the upper hand in this battle. I was no longer the woman he had once manipulated, and I wasn't going to let him walk all over me again. The first step was securing the property legally. Chica had given me some solid advice about consulting a lawyer, and I'd already started to research my options. I had to be sure that everything was protected, nothing could be left to chance. So I called a trusted attorney, one who had helped me with matters before, and set up an appointment. The day of the meeting arrived, and I found myself sitting across from a seasoned lawyer named Mr. Okafor. He was sharp, calculating, and knew exactly how to approach situations like mine. As he went over the legal paperwork with me, his brow furrowed. "This is a complex situation," he said, scanning the documents I handed over. "You're saying that Julius has no knowledge of this property until recently?" "That's right," I replied, my voice steady. "He didn't know about it. I kept it a secret, mainly because I didn't want anyone using it against me. It was my father's legacy, and I didn't want it to become a tool for manipulation." Mr. Okafor nodded, his lips tight in thought. "Well, you've done well to keep it hidden. But now that he knows, he could try to make a case for the property. It's not just about divorce anymore, it's about control. And he knows this is something he can fight for." I leaned forward, gripping the armrests of the chair. "I won't let him have it. He walked away from me, and he walked away from the life we built. He doesn't get to come back and claim what's mine." Mr. Okafor gave me a hard, calculating look, then sighed. "We'll need to make sure everything is legally sound. You'll need documentation that shows your claim to the property predates your marriage. And it will be crucial to prove that Julius had no role in the acquisition of the property." I nodded. "I've kept every document, every detail under my control. He can't touch it unless he's willing to break the law. And I'll make sure he knows that." Mr. Okafor smiled slightly, impressed by my determination. "Good. But remember, this won't be a quick process. Julius will fight you tooth and nail. You have to be prepared for that. I suggest gathering everything, any evidence that shows you've been the sole beneficiary, that this is truly yours and not something you acquired during the marriage." "I understand," I said, my heart racing. The thought of Julius coming for what was mine, what had always been mine, was infuriating but also galvanizing. He didn't understand who he was dealing with. After the meeting, I left the office with a clearer sense of direction. I had my legal strategy, but now came the hard part, waiting for Julius to make his move. I knew it wouldn't be long before he tried to bring the fight to me. The next few days passed with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I could feel the clock ticking, the walls closing in. I didn't know exactly when Julius would strike, but I was ready for him. Then, late one evening, I received an unexpected call. "Hello, Nneka." Julius's voice was smooth, yet there was something else beneath the calm facade, something I couldn't quite place. "We need to talk. I'm coming over." I froze. Every muscle in my body tensed. "What do you want, Julius?" I said, my voice low, steady. "We've already spoken. You walked away. That's it." He sighed, almost like he was tired. "No, Nneka, it's not over. I want to discuss this property. We both know what I'm entitled to, and I think it's time we handle this like adults." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I knew this was coming, but now that it was here, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. "Entitled to?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Julius, you're not entitled to anything. I've worked for everything I have. This property isn't yours to take." There was a long silence on the other end. When he spoke again, his voice was different, darker, more serious. "We'll see about that," he said, and before I could reply, the line went dead. I sat there in shock, staring at the phone in my hand. His words lingered in my mind like a cloud. "We'll see about that." It was clear now he wasn't going to back down. He was coming for the property, and this time he was playing for keeps. I had to be ready. The knock at the door came just as the evening sun began to dip behind the tall city buildings. My heart was already racing before I even stepped toward it. Julius had made it clear that he wasn't going to let this go. He was coming, and this time it wasn't for reconciliation. It was for the property. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The sleek, modern apartment I'd once shared with Julius was now a stark reminder of the past, of everything that had fallen apart. But tonight it felt different. I was no longer the woman who had blindly trusted him. I was the one in control, and I wasn't going to let him walk over me anymore. I opened the door slowly, and there he was, Julius, standing in front of me, tall and imposing, with that same arrogant smirk on his face that always made me feel small. His eyes scanned the room behind me, taking in the neat, well-kept apartment as if trying to measure how much I had moved on without him. "Julius," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You shouldn't have come." He chuckled softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Nneka, we need to talk. This thing with the property, this can't go on." I crossed my arms, glaring at him. "It's already over, Julius. I don't owe you any explanations. The property is mine, and that's the end of it." He shook his head, the smirk fading. "You think you can just keep it all to yourself? You and I both know that if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have gotten anywhere. This property, this life, you never would have had it without me." The word stung, but I refused to let him see it. "You didn't build anything with me, Julius. You just took what you could and left when you thought there was nothing left for you." His eyes flashed with anger, but he quickly masked it with a calm expression. "You think you can just hide behind that property and expect me to walk away? That's not how this works, Nneka. We're married. Anything you own, I'm entitled to." I shook my head, my voice rising in frustration. "You're not entitled to anything, Julius. The marriage is over. You walked away from me, and you don't get to come back and take what's mine. Not now, not ever." There was a tense silence, and for a moment I thought he might finally understand. But then his eyes hardened, and his voice lowered to a threatening tone. "We'll see about that," he said. "You can't just keep this from me. I'll fight you for it. You know that." I didn't flinch. I had prepared myself for this moment. "Do what you have to do. But know this, I'll never back down. I fought for everything I have, and I won't let you take it from me." Julius stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to figure out if I was bluffing. But he knew I wasn't. He could see the determination in my eyes. I wasn't the same woman he had left behind. I had learned to stand on my own. "Fine," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've made your choice, but don't think this is over. I'll make sure you regret this." With that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. As I watched him disappear into the night, I realized that this was just the beginning. He wouldn't stop until he had what he wanted, and now I had to prepare for the battle that was coming. But as I closed the door and locked it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was lurking in the shadows. Something bigger than just Julius and his desire for the property. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I wasn't afraid anymore. I would fight for what was mine, no matter what it took. The weeks that followed Julius's visit were tense. Every phone call, every message, every knock on the door. My heart would race, unsure of what would come next. I knew he wouldn't give up easily. He was a man who had built his identity around control, and the idea of losing that power to me, his estranged wife, was more than he could bear. I focused on getting my affairs in order. I spent hours at the lawyer's office, reviewing the documents again and again, making sure every piece of evidence was solid. I couldn't afford to slip up. Not now. Then one evening, I received an unexpected call. It was from Chica. "Nneka, you need to be careful," she said, her voice tense. "Why?" I asked, already feeling the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. "Julius isn't just sitting around," she continued. "He's hired someone, a private investigator." My heart skipped a beat. Private investigator? That was a move I hadn't expected. Julius was taking things to the next level. "What's he looking for?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "I don't know," Chica replied, "but I think he's trying to dig up dirt, trying to find a way to claim the property, or at least discredit you. You need to be careful, Nneka. He's playing dirty now." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. I had always known Julius could be manipulative, but this felt different. He was no longer just trying to take the property. Now he was trying to destroy me, my reputation, my life. He was willing to go to any lengths to regain control. I had to act fast. The last thing I wanted was for him to find some way to use my past against me. Things I'd kept buried for years. I spent the next few days preparing myself for whatever he was planning. I knew it wouldn't be long before he made his move. The investigator he had hired was only a small part of his strategy. I could feel the storm building, and I had to be ready to face it head-on. And then, one evening, as I was going over some papers in the living room, there was a sudden knock at the door. My pulse quickened as I walked toward it, and for a moment, I considered not opening it at all. But I knew I had to face this. When I opened the door, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Standing in front of me was a woman, elegant, poised, and far too young. She was dressed in a smart, professional suit, and her demeanor was calm but sharp. She wasn't here to offer condolences or to ask if I was okay. No, this woman had come for something. "I'm Sophia," she said, her voice smooth. "I work with Julius. He sent me to speak with you." I froze. I didn't know what to expect, but I certainly wasn't ready for this. "Speak with me about what?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. She gave me a polite but slightly condescending smile. "Julius is still very much invested in this property, and he believes that, given the nature of your relationship, he's entitled to a share. I've been hired to help resolve this issue amicably." A share? After everything that had happened, after everything he'd done to me, he thought he could just waltz back into my life and claim part of my inheritance? I could feel my anger bubbling up, but I pushed it down. I had to keep my cool. "Julius walked away from me, from us, when he decided to leave. He has no right to this property," I said firmly. Sophia's smile remained unchanged, but there was something in her eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. Was it sympathy or something more dangerous? "I'm not here to argue, Mrs. Nneka," she said smoothly. "I'm here to offer you a solution. Julius doesn't want to drag this through the courts. He wants to resolve it peacefully. But if you refuse—" Her words trailed off, and the unspoken threat hung heavily between us. "What is it you're asking me to do?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "I'm just here to help. Julius would like to settle this without further conflict. We can arrange a meeting if you're open to it." "A neutral space, of course," Sophia said, her tone almost sweet. I paused for a moment, considering her offer. It was clear Julius had hired someone to manipulate the situation, but the idea of meeting with him in person made my skin crawl. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice clipped. "But don't expect me to just hand over what's mine." Sophia nodded, unfazed by my resistance. "Of course. I'll be in touch." As she turned to leave, I closed the door behind her, my mind racing. I had a feeling this was only the beginning. Julius was playing a dangerous game, and it seemed he was ready to do whatever it took to win. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not now. Not after everything I'd been through. I had to make sure the next move was mine. The weight of the situation was beginning to sink in. I had been thinking about the meeting with Julius's lawyer all night, trying to make sense of what he was planning. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but the idea of sitting across from him again, facing him after everything that had happened, filled me with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. Sophia's offer had been too clean, too rehearsed. I could tell it wasn't just about the property. It was about control. Julius thought that with a little finesse, he could make everything disappear, erase the damage he'd caused, and walk away with what he felt entitled to. But I wasn't going to let him have the satisfaction. I wasn't just fighting for land or money. I was fighting for my life, my dignity, and my future. The day of the meeting arrived faster than I expected. I found myself standing in front of a sleek, modern building in the heart of Lagos, my pulse racing as I stared up at the tall glass structure. This was where they wanted to meet, where Julius would make his final play. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before walking inside. The lobby was quiet and immaculate, the marble floors gleaming under the soft lights. A receptionist greeted me with a polite smile, directing me to a conference room where Julius and Sophia were waiting. As I entered, I couldn't help but notice how calm Julius appeared. The last time I saw him, he was angry, desperate, but now he sat there, composed and confident. He was no longer the man who had walked away from me. He was the man who thought he could still control everything. Sophia was seated beside him, her gaze sharp as she looked up from her tablet. The moment I walked in, she gave me a small, knowing smile, like she already knew how this meeting was going to end. "Mrs. Nneka, it's good to see you again," Julius said, his voice smooth. "I'm glad you agreed to meet. I want to make this as easy as possible for you. We both know this property has been the center of a lot of tension, and I think we can come to an agreement that benefits both of us." I resisted the urge to laugh. Julius was trying to sweet-talk me, but I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. "What exactly are you offering, Julius?" I asked, crossing my arms and leaning slightly against the back of the chair. He smiled, and for the first time, I could see the glimmer of the man I once knew, the one who had always found a way to twist things in his favor. "I'm offering a fair settlement, Nneka, a chance to avoid a public legal battle. You and I both know that the longer this drags on, the more damage it will cause. I don't want to hurt you. I just want what's rightfully mine." "Rightfully yours?" I repeated, incredulity lacing my voice. "You walked away from this marriage, Julius. You made that choice, and now, you think you can come back and take what's mine because you want it." Sophia's eyes flicked to Julius, and for a brief moment, I saw something pass between them. A silent exchange, a plan in motion. "We're not here to argue, Nneka," Sophia interjected, her voice calm but authoritative. "We're here to resolve this. Julius has been more than patient, but we won't wait forever. If you don't come to an agreement, he's prepared to take this to court, and trust me, you don't want that." I could feel the tension building in the room, the pressure mounting with every word they spoke. But I wasn't backing down. I had come too far to let them intimidate me now. "Let's get one thing straight," I said, my voice steady but filled with conviction. "This property is mine, and there's no amount of manipulation or threats that will change that. I didn't keep it a secret to protect you. I kept it a secret because I didn't trust you, and I still don't." Julius's expression hardened, his jaw clenching. "You're making a big mistake, Nneka," he warned, his voice low and cold. "You think you can play this game alone, but you're wrong. You'll regret this." I stood up, feeling the surge of adrenaline in my veins. "You don't scare me, Julius. You lost that right when you walked out the door. I've worked for everything I have, and I'll be damned if I let you take it from me." Sophia gave Julius a quick glance before standing up as well. "You've made your choice," she said, her tone final. "We'll see you in court then." I didn't flinch as they walked out of the room, their footsteps echoing in the silence that followed. For a moment, I stood there, breathing heavily, my heart still racing. But beneath the anger, Beneath the fear, there was a quiet sense of victory. They had underestimated me, and that was the last mistake they'd make. This fight was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. The days after the meeting felt like they dragged on endlessly, each minute weighed down by the looming threat of the court battle that was now inevitable. Julius and Sophia had made their intentions clear. They weren't going to back down without a fight. But neither was I. I spent the next few weeks immersed in preparations. My lawyer, Mr. Okafor, had advised me to be ready for a long and grueling process. Julius is a fighter, he'd said, but so are you. And I can already see that you're not going to let this go. The night before the court hearing, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with possibilities, scenarios, questions. What if Julius somehow managed to twist the narrative? What if he somehow convinced the judge that he was entitled to the property because of our marriage? The fear of losing everything I had worked so hard to protect gnawed at me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had already come so far. There was no turning back now. The morning of the hearing arrived with a storm, both literal and figurative. The clouds hung heavy in the sky as I made my way to the courthouse with Mr. Okafor by my side. I could feel the weight of the world pressing on my shoulders, but I kept my posture straight, my gaze fixed forward. This was my moment. As we entered the courtroom, I could feel eyes on me. Julius was sitting on the opposite side, his expression hard and unreadable. His lawyer, a tall, stern man named Mr. Nwosu, stood next to him, whispering in his ear. I could sense the tension in the air, the unspoken animosity between Julius and me. The room felt charged, as if everyone was waiting for the first move, the first sign of weakness. The judge, an older woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, called the proceedings to order. We are here today to resolve the matter of the property dispute between Nneka Okoye and Julius Okoye. Both parties have presented their cases, and we will now hear their arguments. I took a deep breath and stood when called. As I walked to the stand, my heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay composed. I knew that everything I said and did in the next few hours would shape the future of my life. Mr. Nwosu was the first to speak, his voice smooth and polished as he presented Julius's case. Your Honor, we believe that Mr. Okoye, due to his long-standing marriage with Mrs. Okoye, has rightful claims to the property in question. While Mrs. Okoye has made claims that the property is hers alone, it is clear that this was acquired during their marriage, and by law, both parties have an equal claim to assets accumulated during their union. The words stung, but I kept my face neutral, reminding myself that this was just the beginning of a fight I had every intention of winning. Mr. Okafor stood next, his tone calm but forceful as he presented my side. Your Honor, the property in question was inherited by Mrs. Okoye from her late father, long before her marriage to Mr. Okoye. There is no legal claim that Mr. Okoye can make on this property, as it was not part of any marital assets. Furthermore, Mrs. Okoye has kept this property separate from their joint assets throughout the duration of the marriage. We ask that the court dismiss Mr. Okoye's claim. As Mr. Okafor spoke, I could feel Julius's eyes boring into me, his gaze cold and calculating. He was watching me, waiting for any sign of weakness. But I had none to give. I had made it this far, and I was going to fight until the very end. The judge listened intently, her expression unreadable as she scribbled notes. Finally, she addressed both sides. I will review the evidence presented and issue a ruling in due time. This court is adjourned until the decision is made. The gavel came down, and just like that, the tension in the room broke. But it was far from over. The waiting began. The next few days were excruciating. Every moment felt like an eternity as I waited for the judge's ruling. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was teetering on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see whether I would fall or be saved. And then, just as I thought I couldn't wait any longer, the phone call came. It was Mr. Okafor. Nneka, he said, his voice steady. The judge has made her decision. My heart raced, and for a moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. What is it? I managed to ask. Congratulations, he said. The property is yours. The judge has ruled in your favor. I stood there stunned. The words didn't fully register at first. "It's mine," I whispered, barely able to believe it. "It's yours," he confirmed. "Julius has no claim to it. The court has ruled that the property was inherited before your marriage, and there is no legal basis for his claim." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I quickly wiped them away. I had won. After all the fear, the doubt, the sleepless nights, I had come out victorious. Julius had underestimated me, and now I held the power. But as I sat down, a strange sense of emptiness washed over me. Yes, I had won the property, but at what cost? Julius was gone from my life, but there was still a part of me that wondered whether all this fighting, all the struggle, had been worth it. The courtroom decision had given me what I wanted. The property was mine. But as the weeks passed, I realized that winning the battle didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. There were no cheers, no celebration. It was as if the victory had come with a bitter aftertaste, one that I couldn't quite swallow. Julius was no longer part of my life, and yet his presence still lingered, like an unwanted shadow. Every corner of the house reminded me of him, of everything he had taken from me before he walked away. Even now, with the property secured and my future ahead of me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I spent the next few days in a haze, unsure of what to do next. The lawyer's office had handled the transfer of ownership smoothly, but I couldn't stop wondering what I was supposed to do with this vast, empty space. The property had once been a symbol of family, of something I was supposed to share with Julius. But now it felt like a burden, a symbol of everything I had fought for, but also everything I had lost. One evening, as I sat on the balcony overlooking the sprawling estate, Chica called. Her voice was filled with excitement, but I could hear a hint of concern beneath it. "Nneka, I just got off the phone with someone who might be able to help you," she said. Her words rushed. "You know that property of yours? There's someone, an investor, I think, who's interested. And he's not just any investor. He's the kind of person who could turn that land into something massive." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Who is it?" "You'll never guess," she replied. "It's Michael, the real estate mogul. You know, the one who's been making waves in the industry for the last few years." I was stunned. Michael. I'd heard of him, of course. He was one of the most successful real estate developers in the country, known for his high-profile projects and lucrative deals. If anyone could turn my property into something more than just an inheritance, it was him. "What does he want?" I asked, my heart beating faster. This could be the opportunity one needed. Something to give me purpose after everything that had happened. "He wants to meet with you," Chica said. "He's willing to discuss what he can offer, what he wants to do with the land. He thinks it has huge potential, and he's willing to make a very generous offer." I sat up straight, my mind racing. This could be the chance I'd been waiting for. I could finally transform this property into something that would change my future. But part of me hesitated. What if I wasn't ready? What if I had to give up too much in exchange for his offer? I had spent so long fighting to keep this property, to prove I was worthy of it. But now I had to decide what to do with it. Did I want to sell? Develop it myself? Or was there something more I could do with it? "I'll meet him," I said, my voice more confident than I felt. "Arrange it." The meeting with Michael was scheduled for 2 days later, at one of the most luxurious hotels in the city. I arrived early, my nerves gnawing at me. I had spent the night thinking about everything, the property, Julius, the divorce, and now this new opportunity. The weight of it all was overwhelming, but I had to make a decision. As I entered the hotel, I was greeted by a receptionist who led me to a private suite. Michael was already there, standing by the window, looking out at the city below. He turned when he heard my footsteps, and a smile spread across his face. "Mrs. Okoye," he said, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." I took his hand, trying to remain composed. "The pleasure's mine." Michael was everything I had imagined. Polished, charming, and with an air of confidence that came from years of success. As we sat down, he wasted no time in getting to the point. "I've done my research on the property," he began, "and I believe it has incredible potential. The location, the land, It's perfect for a high-end development. I'm talking luxury homes, commercial spaces, maybe even a resort. I see it as something that could reshape this part of Lagos. And I'm willing to pay top dollar for it. His words were persuasive, and for a moment I almost believed him. The idea of turning the land into something grand, something that could leave a legacy, something my father would be proud of, was tempting. But I couldn't let myself be swayed so easily. This wasn't just about money. This property wasn't just land to me. It was a part of my father, a symbol of his hard work and sacrifice. It meant something deeper than what anyone could offer. "I appreciate your offer, Mr. Michael," I said, my voice steady. "But I'm not sure I'm ready to sell just yet." His smile faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Of course, Mrs. Okoye. I understand that this is a big decision. But I can assure you, this is an opportunity you won't want to miss. Think about the possibilities, what you could achieve with my resources. Together, we could create something monumental." I hesitated, looking at him carefully. There was something about him that I didn't trust completely. The way he spoke made it clear that he wasn't just interested in the property. He wanted to control it. And in doing so, he wanted to control me just like everyone else. "I'll think about it," I said, standing up. "But I need time. This is not something I can rush." Michael stood as well, his smile returning, but there was a shadow of impatience in his eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Just know that the offer stands." As I walked out of the suite, my mind was whirling. I had just been offered something that could change everything, but I knew that with every decision I made, I was entering a new phase of my life. A phase where I would have to fight even harder to keep control. The days following my meeting with Michael were filled with tension, but also a strange clarity. I knew I was standing at a crossroads. The choice I was about to make would shape the next chapter of my life, and I couldn't afford to make a decision based on impulse or fear. I couldn't stop thinking about Michael's offer. The potential for what the property could become under his guidance was undeniable. But I also knew that selling it would mean giving up something precious, something that had been in my family for generations. I had already fought so hard to keep control of it, and now I had to decide whether to let go or hold on. The decision was suffocating, and I couldn't do it alone. I reached out to Chica, hoping for some clarity. She was the one person I could rely on to give me honest advice, even when I didn't want to hear it. That evening, I met her at a quiet cafe in the city. As soon as I sat down, I could see the concern in her eyes. "What's going on, Nneka? You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." I let out a long sigh. "I've been thinking about Michael's offer," I said, my voice low. "It sounds like a dream come true, everything I've ever wanted. But I don't know if it's the right thing to do. It feels like I'd be giving up something too important if I sell." Chica listened quietly, nodding along. After a long pause, she spoke. "Nneka, you're not just selling land. You're selling a piece of your history. I get why it's hard. But you've also built a future for yourself, and this is your chance to shape it in your own image. Michael's offer is tempting, but you need to think about what you want in the long run." Her words struck a chord with me. She was right. This wasn't just about the property, it was about the future I was building. I had fought too hard to let anyone else take control of my life, my decisions. And now it felt like I was being offered the chance to take full control, to create something that was mine. "I don't want to lose myself in this," I said, looking down at my coffee. "I don't want to be swept away by someone else's vision of success. I want to create something that's truly mine, something that honors my father's legacy, but also moves me forward." Chica smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "Then you have your answer." The next morning, I called Michael to let him know my decision. My hands were shaking slightly as I dialed his number, the weight of the conversation heavy in my chest. When he answered, his voice was warm, almost too smooth. "Nneka, it's good to hear from you. Have you made a decision?" I took a deep breath. "I've thought it over, and I've decided I'm not ready to sell. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to hold onto the property for now." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "I see," Michael said, his tone now colder. "Well, I can't say I'm happy with your decision, but I respect it. Just know that if you change your mind, the offer still stands." I ended the call, my heart pounding in my chest. There was a sense of relief but also a small twinge of doubt. Would I regret this decision later? I didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. I was taking control of my future. The property was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. Not Michael, not Julius, not anyone. I spent the next few weeks researching how to develop the land on my own. I spoke to architects, planners, and investors who were interested in working with me. I was determined to build something meaningful, something that reflected both my father's vision and my own. It wasn't going to be easy, and it certainly wasn't going to happen overnight. But for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about the future. And then, just when I thought I had everything under control, Julius showed up at my door again. I wasn't expecting him, certainly not after everything that had happened. But there he was, standing in front of me, looking older, more worn than I remembered. "What do you want, Julius?" I asked, my voice sharp but tired. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the man I had once loved. But that moment passed quickly, and he straightened his back, his usual arrogance returning. "I want to talk about the property." I shook my head. "There's nothing to talk about, Julius. You don't have any claim to it." "I don't have to, do I?" he said, his voice cold. "I just want to remind you of what you're letting go of." I frowned. "I'm not letting go of anything. This property is mine, and it always has been." Julius's eyes darkened, but he didn't press further. "I'm not here to fight you, Nneka. I just want you to know that I didn't walk away from you because I didn't care. I thought I was doing what was best for both of us." I almost laughed, but I held it in. "Best for both of us? You left me for someone else, Julius. You thought you could have it all. But you don't." He sighed, turning to leave. "I'll never understand you, Nneka. But I guess that's what it is now." As I watched him walk away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Julius was gone, for good this time. And as for the property, I had made my choice. I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me, no matter what. The sun was setting over Lagos, casting a warm golden glow across the city as I sat in my office, staring out at the skyline. The past few months had been a whirlwind, but now, I finally felt like I was in control. The property was mine, and I had no intention of letting anyone take it away from me. I'd learned that life wasn't just about what you owned, but about what you were willing to fight for. And I had fought for everything I had. My freedom, my future, and my father's legacy. The first step toward building something new had already begun. I had hired an architect to begin the planning process, and my vision for the land was starting to take shape. The estate would become a mixed-use development, luxury homes, shops, and spaces for small businesses that would provide opportunities for people like me to thrive. It would honor my father's hard work, but also reflect the woman I had become. As I reviewed some of the early designs, my phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen, my heart skipping a beat when I saw the name. It was Chica. "Nneka," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "You won't believe this." I couldn't help but smile. "What happened?" "I just heard from the bank," she said, practically jumping through the phone. "The loan you applied for? It's approved. The development you're planning? It's all systems go. You've got everything you need to get started." My hands shook slightly as I put the phone down. It was happening. The vision I had for the property was now becoming a reality. The money I had worked so hard for, the inheritance that had seemed like a burden, was now my ticket to creating something meaningful. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Julius, Michael, and everyone else who had doubted me, all of them were in the past. The future was mine to shape. I wasn't just the woman who had inherited a property. I was the woman who would transform it into something that would leave a legacy, one that didn't need anyone's approval. As I picked up the plans again, I thought back to the first time I'd stepped into this house with Julius. I thought it was everything we needed, everything we had worked for. But now I knew the truth. It wasn't the house that mattered, or the property, or the things. It was what I had built and what I would continue to build that mattered. Just then, I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, I found a delivery man standing there with a large envelope. "Delivery for Nneka Okoye," he said, handing it over. I took the envelope, my curiosity piqued. It was from the court. I tore it open, my heart pounding. Inside was a letter confirming that all legal claims to the property had been resolved in my favor, and that no further action would be taken against me. The case was officially closed. I stared at the letter in disbelief. It was over. Julius's attempts to reclaim what was never his had been futile. The property was mine, and no one could take it from me. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The weight that had been pressing down on me for so long, the constant fear of losing everything, was gone. And with it, I finally felt free. The sound of my phone ringing pulled me from my thoughts. It was Chica again. "You did it!" she exclaimed when I picked up. "This is your time, Nneka. You've won. You've built something that's truly yours." I smiled, her words filling me with warmth. "I didn't do it alone," I said softly. "But yes, it's mine. And now, it's time to build something bigger than I ever imagined." As I looked out the window once more, I felt a new sense of purpose. This was my future, one that I had fought for and earned. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The past had shaped me, but it didn't define me. The woman I had become was stronger than I had ever realized. And as I took the first step into this new chapter of my life, I knew one thing for sure. No one could ever take it away from me again.